Hey guys, welcome to today's video where we're going to be discussing the Los Angeles Rams offense and what to expect from them in 2020. Before we get started, please like and subscribe, it really helps my channel grow. And on a quick side note, I've been writing some articles for the updog.com, which is basically a sports article website where people under the age of 22 can write about any sports topics they want to talk about. I'll leave a link to some of my articles as well as some of the other articles down below in the description. And if any of you are interested in writing for theupdog.com, the only requirements are that you're under 22 and you love sports. So go check it out, and I hope you enjoyed the video. So before we start talking about the Rams offense in 2020, let's talk about what they were in 2019. So for starters, they were 7th in total yards, 4th in passing yards, 26th in rushing yards, 11th in points, 22nd in turnovers. And although they did have some inconsistencies on the O-line, they only gave up 22 sacks. Now, what does that show? For most teams, that would be a great season offensively. But compared to what they were in 2018, the Rams saw a really big decline in their offensive efficiency. In 2018, the Rams had one of the NFL's best and most high-scoring offenses in the entire league, and they made a Super Bowl appearance. So 2019 was a real downgrade. Nonetheless, they were 12th in total offensive success rate, which broke down into 20th in run success rate and 11th in pass success rate, and they ranked 3rd in red zone offense success rate too. So that basically shows that the Rams offense last season was very, very pass dependent, and they didn't really run the football that much. I mean, the Rams only ran the football 38% of the time, and they threw the football 62% of the time. So you can see how the Rams really relied on the passing game. In 2019, the Rams had the lowest points per game, rushing yards per game, passing touchdowns per game, and they had the most turnovers they've ever had since McVay has been the head coach there. So you see that last season really just wasn't their year. Anyway, what did they do last season? They were in 11 personnel 73% of the time, and look for that to continue as that most popular personnel grouping there in LA. They did find a little bit more of a rhythm with 12 personnel as the season progressed, but 11 personnel has been Sean McVay's bread and butter offense for a while now, and I think that's going to continue. But after a disappointing 2019 campaign, what did Sean McVay do? So firstly, he hired Kevin O'Connell as his new offensive coordinator. O'Connell, who's 34, spent the past 3 seasons as an offensive assistant in Washington. And he's a former NFL quarterback, and he has experience as a quarterback's coach in Cleveland, as well as an offensive assistant in San Francisco. And in 2017, he joined the Redskins. But last season, O'Connell took over as the play caller after Gruden was fired following an 0-5 start, and he ended up helping develop rookie quarterback Dwayne Haskins, who showed some promise in his final 2 starts of the season. Look for O'Connell to, one, work really closely with Jared Goff and continue to help with his development and continued evolution for the Rams franchise quarterback, and look for him to help with that offensive consistency that was so lacking last year for the Rams. He's going to help Sean McVay scheme, and he's going to just make this Rams offense better. Now let's move on to the players on this Rams offense, and there's no place better to start than Jared Goff. Goff is the 2-time Pro Bowl quarterback who really struggled in 2019. He had the most pass attempts in the league, but his completion percentage was only 62.9%. He threw for 4,600 yards, 22 touchdowns, and 16 interceptions, which is just not what the Rams wanted after giving him a big contract. Nonetheless, if Goff can rebound to what he was able to do in 2018, where he threw for 4,600 yards, 32 touchdowns, and 12 interceptions, then maybe this Rams offense can get to that next level and go back to where they were one of those better offensive units in the NFL. Nonetheless, I mean, Goff is going to continue to develop as a franchise quarterback there in LA, and he's shown at times that he has the potential to be a really, really great player. I mean, at times in 2018, for the first half of the season, he was an MVP candidate, and if he can get back to some of that success, then this Rams offense will have a great signal caller to rely on. But now let's move to the running game, which really struggled last season in LA. As I said, the Rams really relied on throwing the football a lot more than running the football, and that's basically because they couldn't really establish a dominant running game. And part of that reason was Todd Gurley. I'm not saying Todd Gurley had a bad season last year, but Todd Gurley wasn't himself, and Todd Gurley is no longer in LA. He ended up getting cut, and he's now with the Falcons, but I'm just going to talk about Todd Gurley for a second to show what the Rams ended up losing in the offseason. Gurley was a 3-time Pro Bowler, 2-time All-Pro, and he was 2015's Offensive Rookie of the Year as well as 2017's Offensive Player of the Year. Gurley, when he was healthy, was really, really dominant. I mean, In 2018, if you look at his 2018 numbers, he had 1,200 yards, 17 touchdowns. Those are crazy stats. And in 2017, he had 1,300 yards and 13 rushing touchdowns. Although there was a dip in production last year at 857 rushing yards and 12 rushing touchdowns, Gurley is still going to be missed. He was a big touchdown guy, and he was a great red zone threat for this Rams offense. He was a guy that could be trusted on in the red zone, and without Gurley there, I think some of that red zone efficiency will go away. But let's talk about the Rams running backs that they do have on the roster. Let's start with Darrell Henderson, who is going to be going into his second season next year. Henderson barely played in 2019. He only had 39 rushing attempts for 147 rushing yards, and he didn't even have a rushing touchdown. But look for Henderson to get a lot more targets next season and a lot more touches next season, as he's probably the favorite, if not second favorite guy to win the starting job. Yet I think this Rams running back room is really going to be a running back by committee thing, as in my eyes, there's no clear number one running back, and there's not even a clear number two running back. I think it's going to be Henderson as well as the other running backs in that running back room. Let's move on to the second running back in that running back room, who I think by the middle of the season could end up taking the starting job. Of course, I'm talking about Cam Akers, who was drafted in the second round out of Florida State. Akers rushed for over 1,100 yards last year on 231 rushing attempts, and he had 14 rushing touchdowns. I'm actually really excited to see what Akers is able to do. At FSU, he didn't have a good O-line, but he was able to create room for himself to run, and he was a great player on that FSU offense. This was a great running back draft. If you look at guys like DeAndre Swift or Clyde Edwards-Helaire or J.K. Dobbins, and seeing if the Rams picked Cam Akers out of the other guys and not wanting to trade up for a guy really shows that they like Cam Akers a lot. I think Akers is going to probably end up being the starting running back by the end of the season. He was good at FSU, and I think he could be good in the NFL. They also have Malcolm Brown, who is going to probably be the third running back there. Last year, he had 69 rushing attempts for 255 rushing yards and 5 rushing touchdowns. And although I think that he will see a dip in production next season just because of Darrell Henderson establishing himself as a real running back in that running back room, Malcolm Brown is a veteran guy who has been with the Rams for his entire career, and I think he can continue to be a veteran guy and a veteran leader in that running back room, especially when the other two guys in that running back room are younger guys who are going to need some help getting better in the NFL. Now let's move to the wide receiver room. So in the offseason, obviously the big news was that they ended up trading away Brandin Cooks, who, although he didn't have a great 2019, is still a really good player in the NFL. In 2019, he only had 583 receiving yards on 42 receptions and 2 receiving touchdowns, but in 2018 with the Rams, he had 80 catches for 1,200 yards and 5 receiving touchdowns. So that's what he's capable of. He was a deep threat who could stretch the field. And although the Rams are going to lose him, I think this receiving core is still really, really solid. And I think they will move on throughout the season smoothly. Let's start with Cooper Kupp. Kupp is probably the number one wide receiver there in LA. And 2019 was a fantastic year for him. He had 94 catches for 1,100 yards and 10 touchdowns, and he was a great red zone threat for this Rams offense. He's a reliable target for Jared Goff, and he's probably Jared Goff's favorite target. He played in all 16 games, started in 14 of them, and I think with Brandin Cooks no longer there in LA, Kupp is only going to get a bigger target share next season. They've also got Robert Woods, who's kind of a do-it-all wide receiver. He's not the biggest touchdown guy, but last season he had 90 catches for 1,100 yards and 2 receiving touchdowns, and he played in 15 games. I think Kupp and Woods give Goff 2 legit NFL wideouts that can create a great duo in LA. They give Goff a lot of experience. They've already established themselves in the NFL, and they've already established that they're great, dependable wide receivers who could play at the NFL level and make a significant impact. I think they could combine for 2,500 yards, 15 touchdowns, and maybe 190 receptions next year, and I don't think that's completely ludicrous. They're both going to get increased target shares without Brandin Cooks, and I think they could both benefit from that. So the real question is, who's going to be that third wide receiver in the Rams offense? The favorite for now is probably going to be Josh Reynolds, who's been with the Rams for a little bit. In 2018, which was his best season, he had 29 catches for 402 yards, and last season he had 21 catches for 326 yards. He's had 7 career touchdowns, and in 3 seasons, that's not terrible, especially in his role. He hasn't been the biggest participator in that Rams receiving game. Nonetheless, at times in 2018, he was a really dependable option for Jared Goff, and I think he could become one of those dependable guys in that offense once again. They also picked up Van Jefferson in the draft out of Florida. At Florida last season, he had 49 catches for 657 receiving yards and 6 receiving touchdowns. Jefferson is not the biggest game breaker as a wide receiver, but nonetheless, he is a great route runner and he really understands route running. And I think he could add another dimension and another layer to this Rams passing game. He's a guy that could, in theory, be that wide receiver 3 if Josh Reynolds goes down with injury, or maybe Van Jefferson simply ends up winning that third wide receiver role as the season progresses. I think he's got a lot of upside. He's a great, dependable guy, and he was at Florida. He was one of the better receivers in the country, and although he's a little bit on the older side for a rookie, I think he's a great third or even fourth wide receiver for this Rams offense. Now let's talk about the tight ends. Let's start with last year's breakout star, Tyler Higbee. Higbee in 2018 only had 24 catches and 292 receiving yards, but last season in 2019, he had 69 catches for 734 receiving yards and 3 receiving touchdowns. Higbee really showed that he could be a dominant guy for this Rams passing game, and especially without Brandin Cooks, he is a legit NFL tight end. He proved that last year, and if Higbee is able to continue on and build off of what he was able to accomplish in 2019, then I think the Rams have found their tight end that can be that guy that Jared Goff can count on and look for, especially in the red zone. I mean, he didn't have that much red zone success last year, but Higbee was a great player all over the field and look for him to continue with that role in 2020. Now let's move on to Gerald Everett. Everett last season had 37 catches for 408 receiving yards and 2 receiving touchdowns, even with Higbee's success. Everett has played in the NFL for 3 years. It's going to be his 4th season next year, and he has established himself as a solid guy on that Rams offense. I think he could end up putting up 500 yards, 45 catches, and maybe 3 touchdowns next year, even if Higbee continues on that route that he's on. I think Everett is a dependable guy, and Jared Goff can really trust him in that offense. But now let's move to the offensive line. That offensive line is a questionable offensive line unit. I mean, at times they were good, at times they really struggled, and they had a lot of injuries throughout the season that made them inconsistent. And in 2018, the Rams offensive line was one of the better offensive lines in the NFL, but they saw some dip in production last year. Let's start at the left tackle with Andrew Whitworth. Whitworth recently renewed his contract to stay in LA for the next few seasons, and last year was a pretty solid season for the NFL veteran. He only gave up 1 sack, he played over 1,000 snaps, and he had a 72.8 PFF player grade, but the real knock on him was that he gave up 14 penalties, which is almost inexcusable. Like, as a veteran left tackle, he shouldn't be giving up 14 penalties, but nonetheless, Whitworth, when healthy, is one of the better left tackles in the NFL. He's an established guy, he's a veteran presence, and for a younger offensive line, I think Whitworth could really help out this offensive line. Plus, he's a great blindside protector for Jared Goff, and look for Andrew Whitworth to be a lock at the left tackle position. At the left guard position, there is a little bit of uncertainty who will play there, but I think it's going to be Austin Corbett. Corbett only played in 542 snaps last year. He gave up 4 penalties and 1 sack, and he earned a 51.8 PFF player grade last season. He came via a midseason trade from the Cleveland Browns, and he only played in 8 games for the Rams, and he only played in 11 games last season. That was for the Rams and the Browns. So Corbett will probably be the left guard, but he has played center in the past, and he's a versatile guy who could end up being a valuable member to this Rams O-line. At center is Austin Blythe. Blythe played 996 snaps last year. He gave up 3 penalties and 2 sacks, which is really solid, but his PFF grade was not too great. He only had a 50.3 PFF grade, which is terrible. Nonetheless, Blythe, if he can improve next season, he played in 15 games last year. He is a versatile guy. He can play at the guard position. He can play at the center. And he's probably going to be a lock at the center position. I think if injuries happen, he can play the guard position too. At right guard is probably going to be David Edwards. Edwards played 689 snaps last year, gave up 9 penalties, which was a problem, and only gave up 1 sack, which was good. He earned a 61.0 PFF player grade, and that's pretty solid. So look for David Edwards to be that right guard there next season for the Rams. Now let's move on to the right tackle, Rob Havenstein. Last year was really a rough year for the right tackle. He gave up 5 sacks, 8 penalties, and only played 616 snaps, and his PFF grade was 50.9. Yet in 2018, he was one of the better right tackles in the league. And although he did miss a few games in 2019, he missed 7 games in 2019, the time that he was on the field in 2019 was nowhere near the quality of what he was able to do in 2018. So if he improves in 2020, then he will probably be that solid right tackle, and him and Whitworth are going to be great bookends for this Rams offensive line. But if Havenstein struggles next year, then I doubt that this Rams offensive line will be able to get out of the rut that they were stuck in last season. So look for the Rams offensive line to be on the rise as they're going to be healthy in 2020. They've got Andrew Whitworth back. They're hopefully going to get an improved season from their right tackle in Rob Havenstein. And maybe the interior of that offensive line won't be that great, but I think the bookends and the tackles will be pretty solid. They do also have some guys that could come off the bench and step up if need be. I mean, they've got guys like Brian Allen and Joe Noteboom, but nonetheless, I think that this Rams offensive line should improve because last year they were terrible. And we've seen what they've been able to do in the past. They've been a great unit in the past. I think 2019 was really just a slip up more than anything else. Yet, nonetheless, although there is a lot to like with this Rams offense, I can't say I like their running game, and I can't be 100% sure that this offensive line is great. I do trust Sean McVay. I do trust Jared Goff, and I very much trust this passing game there in LA. But I think for the Rams to be successful, they need a good running attack. Also, I don't love the division they're in. I don't think they can have a winning record in a division where the Seahawks and the 49ers look at the top and the Arizona Cardinals look to be on the rise. I think the Rams are probably going to end up fourth in the division next season. And although in another division they could probably be division winner, I think that division is really going to cause problems for them next season. Nonetheless, I think that the Rams offense is going to be better next year. It's really more about that Rams defense if they can pick up the pieces and be a better defensive unit in 2020. They did lose a few guys in free agency like Corey Littleton and Dante Fowler, but nonetheless, they've still got stars like Aaron Donald and Jalen Ramsey to hopefully mend that Rams defense. If the Rams defense can sort things out and the Rams offense can return to their 2018 form, then the LA Rams could make some noise in the NFC West. But I think that is kind of unlikely. I don't know what you guys think, but at the end of the day, the Rams are going to be playing 6 games against very tough opponents in the 49ers, the Seahawks, and the Cardinals. Yet, I think the Rams could end up maybe going 3-3 in the division, stealing a few games from each team. And at the end of the day, I think the Rams are on the rise. They struggled last season. They went 9-7. That was the worst season under Sean McVay. And I think they can only improve next season. Maybe they won't improve record-wise because of that hard NFC West, but I think they can improve as a football team. I think going 7-9 or 8-8 is something that is pretty logical for this Rams team. This Rams team isn't devoid of talent. They've got talent. It's just they need to have the pieces in the right places. If the Rams offense is able to go back to what they were able to do in 2018, even without Brandin Cooks or Todd Gurley, which is going to make things more difficult, I think that this Rams team could end up being the division winners. I mean, the Rams offense in 2018 was so good that it made up for a mediocre Rams defense. Nonetheless, I think in 2020, it's going to be an interesting season for this Rams offense and for this Rams team in general. So get excited to watch the Rams as they move into SoFi Stadium for their first season in SoFi Stadium, and just get excited to see how this Rams offense and defense in general is able to turn around the 9-7 season they had last year into hopefully a better season in 2020.
Now that you've reached the end of my video, I want to thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe as it helps my channel out, and check out my other videos on my channel. Also, you can follow my Instagram, the link is in the description down below, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Until next time, see ya.